The air in the courtroom felt heavy, like it knew secrets that hadn't been spoken in decades. People whispered behind hands, papers shuffled. My sister sat at the defendant's table, head down, hands clenched. She didn't see me walk in. No one did, except the judge. She froze mid-sentence. I watched her eyes flicker with disbelief, like she was trying to match my face to a memory that didn't belong here. Then, in a voice just above a whisper, "You're the governor?" The whole room turned, and for the first time in years, my family saw me. They used to call me the disappointment. Said I wasn't cut out for much, too quiet, too strange, too soft. They didn't say it outright, but I felt it every time they looked past me at dinner, every time I did something worth noticing, and no one noticed. When I left home at 23, nobody stopped me. No hugs, no tears, just the sound of my suitcase wheels echoing down the porch steps. And after that, nothing. No calls, no birthday cards, no, "How are you doing?" They thought I'd failed. Vanished into the world like a sad little afterthought. But I didn't vanish. I built something, quietly, carefully, away from their eyes, away from their opinions. And now I was back. Not because I missed them, not to gloat, but because fate, in all its strange humor, had brought me here, to this courtroom, to this case, to her. I sat in the back row, didn't say a word. But I could feel the ripples spreading as whispers started to crawl across the benches. "She's the governor?" "No, can't be." "Isn't that her sister?" The judge cleared her throat. She looked shaken, but professional. "I apologize. Let's continue." I kept my eyes on my sister. She still hadn't looked up. She was pale, thinner than I remembered. But there was no mistaking that posture, that same arrogant tilt to her chin, like the world owed her grace. Funny. She used to say I had no spine. You might think I came to watch her suffer. But the truth is, I didn't care about that. I came for something much quieter. Closure? Maybe. Justice? Perhaps. But more than anything, I came to remember who I used to be and to prove to no one but myself who I became because of it. The prosecutor stood and began his opening. Words flew across the room: embezzlement, fraud, betrayal of trust. My sister's head sank lower. Her lawyer sat stiffly beside her, and I simply listened, not out of joy, but because every sentence spoken felt like a stitch closing an old wound. This wasn't revenge. This was a reckoning. At one point, the judge glanced at me again, her voice softer now, as if acknowledging more than just my title. "Governor, would you be willing to speak during sentencing?" The room gasped. My sister's head whipped around. Her eyes met mine for the first time in 15 years, and the color drained from her face. I didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't nod. I just held her gaze, and in that silent moment, she realized the sister she'd forgotten, the one she called weak, was the only person in this room with the power to decide what happened next. There's a special kind of loneliness that lives inside a house full of people. It doesn't shout, it whispers, it waits at dinner tables and hides behind birthday cakes that never got made. That was my home. I was the eldest daughter, the one who got up early, followed rules, cleaned her shoes before stepping in. But I was also the one they forgot. My mother, Grace, she was all sharp edges and appearances. Hair always in place. Voice always biting. She once told me, "You could be pretty if you just tried." My father, David, wasn't cruel. He just wasn't anything. He existed behind a newspaper, nodded when spoken to, and followed wherever. Grace pointed. And then there was Emily, my younger sister, loud, brilliant, dramatic, like a flame that drew every eye in the room. But that flame burned. She knew how to twist things. She'd break a vase, then cry until I got blamed for raising. My voice. She'd take money from Mom's purse, then convince her it was me sneaking out at night. One time, I remember standing in the hallway, soaked in sweat after running home in the rain. Emily had told them I skipped school. I hadn't. I was in class. I had the paper to prove it, but Grace didn't even glance at it. She looked me up and down and said, "You're always bringing shame to this family." I remember thinking, I didn't even do anything. They believed her, every time, because she sparkled, because I didn't. When I got rejected from college, my dream program, I didn't cry. I just sat on the porch, letter in hand, and stared into the trees. No one asked what the letter was. No one cared. But when Emily got her acceptance, months later, they threw her a party, streamers, balloons, a catered dinner. Grace hugged her and said, "You've made us proud." David even smiled and clinked a glass. I stood in the corner, holding the camera, taking the pictures. It all came crashing down the week after my 23rd birthday. The birthday they forgot again. I came home from work, still in my grocery store, uniform, and found my suitcase already packed. Grace stood in the doorway with her arms folded. Emily was behind her, looking almost triumphant. Grace didn't yell. She just said, "I won't have a thief in my house." I blinked. "A what?" Emily stepped forward, chin high. She said I'd stolen cash from Dad's safe, that she saw me do it. I laughed at first. It was too ridiculous. But then David walked into the room and looked at me like I was a stranger. No one asked my side. No one looked for the missing money. They just pointed at the door. I remember standing on the porch, same as I had years before, only this time, with a suitcase beside me and nowhere to go. I turned to Grace and said, "You're going to regret this." She rolled her eyes. "If only you'd been more like Emily," she muttered, then closed the door in my face. I wish I could say I cried, but I didn't. Something broke that night. Not loudly, not dramatically. It cracked quietly, like glass under pressure. And in that silence, I found something I didn't expect. Discipline, direction, not the kind you're taught, the kind you build out of spite. For a long time, I lived like a ghost, moving from one city to another, working, studying, building, always in the shadows. But I never stopped thinking about her, not out of revenge, not even hate. I just couldn't shake the feeling that Emily wasn't done, that the lies she told weren't just childish games. And one day, I heard a name mentioned at a conference, a new financial director at a nonprofit accused of laundering. Her name? Emily Grant. My stomach twisted. That flame was starting to burn everything around her. I didn't come back for vengeance. I came because I knew what she was capable of, and I wasn't going to let her ruin anyone else the way she ruined me. They erased me. And for a while, I let them. I disappeared from their stories, from their photographs, from their version of the past. But I didn't vanish. I just went underground. At first, survival was all I had space for. Night shifts at a gas station, cleaning offices no one noticed were dirty, sleeping in my car behind a church that never asked questions, studying during breaks, eating from whatever was left in the deli bin. I wasn't proud. I was hungry, not just for food, but for direction. For something to build with my hands so the ache in my chest didn't eat me alive. Then came Maya. Soft-spoken, all heart. She worked the front counter at the diner where I picked up an extra shift. She noticed I always read campaign policy books during break. One night, she leaned in and whispered, "You don't belong here." I gave her a tired smile and said, "Sure feels like I do," but she shook her head. "You think in full sentences, you plan. That's not nothing. Apply for this." She slid a folded flyer into my pocket. It was for a local political fellowship. Free tuition, paid housing, only 5 slots. I almost threw it away. But something inside me, maybe that last spark of who I used to be, held on. I applied under my middle name, the one no one in my family ever used. And by some miracle, or maybe fate just getting bored, I got in. For the first time in years, I had a bed, books, a schedule. And people who listened when I spoke, that's where I met Senator Briggs. She was guest lecturing. Sharp eyes, sharper questions. She asked us, "What's the difference between power and control?" Everyone gave textbook answers. I said nothing. After class, she stopped me in the hallway. "You didn't speak," she said. I shrugged, didn't think I had anything useful to say. She looked at me like she saw something under the skin. "Next time, say it anyway. You've got teeth. Don't pretend you don't." Under her mentorship, I learned more than politics. I learned strategy. Silence can be a weapon. Stillness can be a position. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just surviving better than they ever thought you could. Over the next 10 years, I built a name, quietly, under the radar. I took the long road, local offices, community boards, speeches no one wanted to give, and finally, they started calling me governor. They didn't know where I came from, and I didn't tell them. I wasn't that girl anymore. Then one morning, everything cracked open. I was drinking lukewarm coffee, half asleep, scrolling headlines. And then I saw it. Senator's daughter involved in charity fraud. I froze, clicked the article, and there it was. Her photo, Emily, her hair, was shorter, makeup heavier, but I'd know that smirk anywhere. My Emily. Memories came flooding back, fast and sharp. The Chanel bag she flaunted at 17. The $400 shoes she claimed were a gift. The way she always had someone else's credit card in her purse, saying, "Oh, it's just Mom's," she said. I could use it. The charity gala she threw at 20, so polished it made my skin crawl. Back then, I'd thought maybe I was just bitter. But now I saw it for what it was. She didn't just lie. She built lies, dressed them up in glitter and called it virtue. My phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. "Is this Ms. Lane?" a man asked, cautious. "That depends." He paused, then said, "I'm Detective Rowe, Financial Crimes Unit. I believe you're related to Emily Grant." The name hit me like a slap. I kept my voice steady. "We haven't spoken in over a decade." "That may be true," he said, "but your name came up. I believe you were present at a few of her earlier events. We'd like to ask some questions." I told him I'd think about it, hung up, and stared out the window for a long time. It wasn't just her anymore. She was dragging down everything around her, charities, families, lives. People trusted her, and she did what she always did. Took, lied, smiled, repeated. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my parents, about how proud they were of her, how they'd probably still find a way to blame me if this all came out. But then I remembered something Briggs once told me: you don't owe anyone silence, especially the ones who broke you. So I called Detective Rowe back, and I said, "I'll help you." He asked if I was sure, that it could get ugly, that my name might be dragged into things. But I was ready, not out of hate, out of duty. She burned me once, but this time, I wasn't. The one holding the match. Revenge isn't fire. It's ice, and it melts. Slowly. I didn't walk into that courtroom to gloat. I walked in to finish something, to bring an ending that had waited a decade in silence, not with screams, not with a fight, just strategy. After that call with Detective Rowe, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't about healing. It wasn't about justice. It was about balance. So I called Audrey, my former campaign manager. now a sharp-tongued lawyer with a memory like a vault and a spine made of stone. I told her everything: my family, Emily, the lies, the gala, the fraud. She listened without interrupting. And when I finally finished, she simply said, "We do this clean, no loose ends, and no fingerprints, unless you want them seen." Then there was Elijah, my bodyguard, though that word never fit right, former Marine, silent observer. I once asked him why he never asked questions. He shrugged and said, "Some people talk too much. You don't. That's why I trust you." I brought him in, not to protect me, but to stand watch. You'd be surprised how much power comes from simply being unshakable. And then came Margaret, our old nanny. I hadn't seen her since I was 17, but Audrey tracked her down, handed her a statement, and said gently, "We're giving you a chance to tell the truth." Margaret's hands trembled. She said, "I always knew that girl, Emily, wasn't right. But your mother, she loved pretending things were perfect. And then she signed the paper, a sworn affidavit, detailing the things Emily did as a child, stealing, manipulating, using Margaret's checks to order clothes online under false names. It wasn't about revenge. It was about pattern, about showing the court this wasn't sudden. It was built, over time, just like mine. And then Briggs called, her voice calm but urgent. "I've been watching the case unfold. Do you want this public?" I hesitated. "I didn't want it to be about me," she said. "It already is. And maybe it should be. Corruption needs a face. And this girl, this case, is about more than family secrets. It's about how much we let charm blind us." So the plan was set, quiet, legal. Every step like a chess move played 10 turns ago. I gave Roe everything I had: old photos, records, patterns, timelines. Audrey prepped documents. Elijah ran silent security on leaks. And Briggs arranged for the right journalist to be sitting in the courtroom. I leaked documents anonymously: bank records, checks that didn't match donation claims, screenshots of emails Emily had sent from a dummy charity account. I tipped off the IRS, not with claims, but with evidence. Flagged transactions, phantom vendor accounts. They launched a private audit within days. And then I spoke to the city council behind closed doors, used my position, my voice, not to sway the court, but to question the permits that had been fast-tracked through Emily's nonprofit. "Review them," I said, "carefully." They did. And in court, I sat still. Second row, center aisle, never looked away, never offered help. Not even when Emily finally glanced at me, desperate, confused. She mouthed my name, twice, like she wasn't sure if it was real, but I didn't blink, didn't smile, didn't acknowledge her at all. The judge's voice cut through the courtroom, like a crack of thunder. She was mid-sentence. Then she paused. Her eyes met mine, froze, and she said, "Excuse me, but can you confirm your name?" The whole room turned. So did Emily. So did my mother. I stood slowly and said, "Governor Lane." There was a beat of silence, the kind that echoes in your chest. Then the judge exhaled. "I thought so." And then it happened. Emily, who had controlled every room since she was a teenager, whispered under her breath, "No, no way." My mother gasped, not delicately, loudly. I didn't even look at her, because this wasn't about her. Not anymore. The judge cleared her throat and said, "Governor Lane, would you be willing to speak on the record as a character witness?" I nodded and walked to the stand. Emily looked like she might be sick. When I sat down, I didn't start with accusations or anger. I just said, "I've known the defendant since we were children. I lived in the same house, ate at the same table, watched her create stories that always made her the hero, and everyone else the villain." I talked about patterns, about small lies, about how charm can be weaponized. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to, because truth doesn't need volume. It needs weight. When I stepped down, the judge thanked me, the prosecutor nodded, and Emily, she looked hollow, like she'd finally seen the mirror, and didn't recognize herself. After court, my mother tried to approach me in the hallway, called my name like she hadn't spat it from her mouth years ago. I turned, held her gaze, and said, "I'm not your daughter anymore." She reached for my arm. I stepped back and walked away. Later that week, I got a message from Briggs. "Your sister pled out. Full confession. The press is running the story tomorrow. You did it. No smiley face, no congrats, just the facts, exactly how I liked them." Elijah asked me that night, "Do you feel better?" I thought about it, sitting on the balcony, watching the city breathe beneath my feet, and I said, "No, but I feel..." "Done," he nodded. "Sometimes that's enough." They called me a failure, said I'd never be anything, but I became the one thing they never expected: untouchable. Not because I screamed, not because I fought, but because I waited, watched, and let truth do what fire never could. Truth doesn't shout. It doesn't beg to be heard. It just stands still and waits for the noise to wear itself out. The courtroom felt colder that day, or maybe it was just me. The final hearing, all motions filed, all evidence submitted. The judge straightened her robe, glanced at the gallery, then looked at me. "Governor Lane, as you were directly referenced in this case, and by request of the prosecution, your presence will be formally noted for the record." I stood, calm, steady, and for the first time since this all began, I spoke. "I'm not here for revenge," I said. "I'm here to ensure the law is honored. Simple, no emotion, no theatrics, but the weight of it, it hung in the air like a storm cloud refusing to rain." That's when I heard her. My mother. Her voice cracked through the silence. "Please." She didn't mean to. She's not that person. She made a mistake. She sobbed like it was her last chance at redemption. But the tears weren't for me. They never were. They were for Emily, the daughter she still believed could be saved. I didn't say a word. I didn't even look her way, because sometimes the greatest justice isn't what you say. It's what you withhold, and that's when Emily cracked. She stood up suddenly, hands trembling against the table, her voice sharp, furious. "She set me up," she shouted. "She's always hated me. She's just jealous." Everything was fine until she came back. People gasped. Even her lawyer looked like the air had been punched out of him. The judge slammed her gavel. "Miss Grant, control yourself, or you will be removed from this courtroom." But Emily wasn't. Done. She kept going. She wanted to ruin me. I'm the victim here. She lied. She planned this. Her eyes locked onto mine like she was trying to tear something out of me. But I just stared. No anger, no joy, just stillness. The kind of stillness you reach when every storm inside you has finally passed. The judge gave her one final warning. "Sit down." Emily slumped into her seat, face pale, mascara smudged, breathing like she'd run a mile barefoot. The courtroom went quiet, heavy, and then the verdict. On the charges of charity fraud, wire fraud, and tax evasion. The judge paused. "We find the defendant, Emily Grant, guilty on all counts." No cheers, no applause, just silence. As the truth stood, right where I left it, the court adjourned, reporters whispered, flashes clicked. Audrey squeezed my hand once, then walked out. Elijah met me by the door, gave a slight nod. Briggs was already gone. Her part had been played. And my mother? She sat on the bench, crying softly into a silk handkerchief, still mourning the image, not the person. Emily was escorted out in cuffs. She didn't look at me again, but as she passed, she whispered, "This isn't over." I didn't respond, because for me, it was. They said I failed. They wrote me off, buried me with silence. So I used silence to bury their lies, and in the end, that quiet was louder than anything they ever said. The courthouse doors opened, and I walked straight into a wall of noise, cameras flashing, microphones shoved forward, questions flying like bullets. But I said nothing, not out of fear, not because I didn't have something to say, but because I didn't need to anymore. They said I failed, said I was soft, forgettable, but I didn't rise with noise. I rose in the silence. While they laughed, I studied. While they pointed fingers, I built foundations. While they slept, I sharpened every quiet part of myself into strategy. I never begged, never explained, never screamed to be seen. And when the time came, I let the truth do the screaming for me. I moved through the crowd like smoke, unshaken, unreachable. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them rewrite history to make sense of their shame. Because in the end, the most brutal revenge is to become everything they said you couldn't be, and let them choke on their silence.